Hi everybody, it's just gone 7 p.m, so I think we're going to get started with this book launch. Those of you who don't know me, I'm Jasmine, I'm from Carcanet Press, so thank you all for being here. Obviously we're here to launch Chris Beckett's new book, Tenderfoot, remarkable new collection, so thank you all for being here to celebrate with us. I'm just going to run over how this event's going to work. I'm going to point you out to some of the tech, and then I'm going to hand over to Daljit Nagra. So before I do that, please do, in your Zoom, in your computer, find out where the chat is. It might be under an option called More. Do say hi to us. Obviously, we can't see your faces and we can't hear any of you, so it'd be nice to hear your thoughts throughout the event. If you want to send in any questions for Chris to answer later on, there'll be a Q&A with Daljit later on, so put those in the chat. There's also a Q&A box if you want to click on that and send them in there. So the event's going to last 1 hour. As I said, I will hand over to Daljit Nagra, who you may know from BBC Radio 4 Extra's Poetry Extra. Daljit is also an excellent poet. He's a favoured poet, so you should seek his collections out if you don't know them. Daljit will introduce Chris, who will then pop up and he will read from the new book for us. He's going to be sharing his texts on the screen so that you can read along. If you do need to see his face bigger for any reason, just double click on his face if you need to lip read or anything like that. But you should be able to read along while he is going through the book. Daljit will return and he and Chris will have a bit of a conversation, and then we'll have the time for audience questions to be put to Chris. So obviously you've all paid £2 to be here. Thank you so much. You will get an email tomorrow with a discount code in it. So just look out for that, and then you can get your £2 off the book. But do email me if you have any problems. So without further ado, I think it's time to get going. And I will hand over to Daljit.
Hello. I think I'm on, Jasmine. Can you hear me?
Yes, you sound great.
Great. Okay. Hello, everyone. It's a great honour to be here from my house in West London in Harrow. And I've known Chris for just about 2 decades now. We started off together in writing groups, and we watched each other perform, and we performed various events together. I've always enjoyed his work. I've enjoyed the energy, the freshness, the dynamism of his work. So those who don't know Chris, he's published 3 collections. The first one was called The Boy Who Thinks He's a Fish. And the title poem, The Boy Who Thinks He's a Fish, won the Poetry London competition many years ago now. And it's a fantastic poem about Harry's on an aeroplane who overhears a story about a dog. So it's an interesting approach to a poem. And Chris's second collection, Ethiopia Boy, was published 2004. And his latest we're celebrating today is Tenderfoot. And you'll notice all 3 of them have fantastic paintings, all painted by Isao Miura. There, and here's Chris's husband. So fantastic paintings. With this book, so Chris, maybe I can ask you a question before you start reading from the work. So I don't know if you're available to talk to. Can you unmute yourself? I think you might be on mute, maybe. And I should probably mention that, some of you may have heard Chris with Ethiopia Boy on the Verb. He's been a significant figure in the poetry world, so his voice is out there. And what really excites me about his work is being a white man. Well, not the stereotype in my head of an Ethiopian, forgive my ignorance, but Chris writes about Ethiopia, and his interest in Ethiopia has deepened with each book. So right from his first book, I think the second half was about Ethiopia, his interest in Ethiopia, and the second book was completely about Ethiopia, it's the title Ethiopia Boy. And Tenderfoot is, again, completely about his preoccupation and life to do with Ethiopia, which makes a fantastic reading. And I would say he's a real authority about Ethiopia. You can really feel that because he writes from the inside about the ordinary lives, and he's very confident with the language. He's a translator of Ethiopian poetry, and I think his anthology has come out, or is going to come out soon, of Ethiopian poets in the Amharic language to English. So he's making a fantastic contribution to Ethiopian culture in Britain, making us understand that part of the world a bit more. Hi, Chris, you there?
I'm here, but I can't.
Yeah, well, I can hear you. You're fine. It's fine.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
so Chris, just before you read, maybe just a little introduction, because people might not know, and there's loads of people online watching you right now.
Yeah.
What's your interest with Ethiopia? Aren't you just a Londoner? Who are you?
A Londoner. But I grew up, well, I spent a few years as a child in Ethiopia. My father worked in the embassy there, the British embassy there. And, you know, I got ill. I got sort of whooping cough, malaria sort of mix. And when I was 9, my parents decided that they should send me away to boarding school. So I went off from Addis Ababa. I flew off to Yorkshire, to Pocklington in Yorkshire. And yeah, that really affected me. And it's affected me, I suppose, my whole life, because, you know, Ethiopia sort of became this amazing sort of prelapsarian Garden of Eden for me. The place I was so happy, I always felt at home. And when I went back as an adult, I felt just as at home as I had as a child. I felt like I was becoming a child again. So it's got a very special place in my heart. And I've got loads of great friends who've helped me, you know, learn a bit more of the language, and also to, you know, to translate poems. And some of those friends are listening now. Yemisraj and her brother Ananya, I think, are both listening to us now. So I'm very happy to have them. I'm really happy to be introduced by Daljit as well. I mean, it's such a great honor, Daljit. Thank you for doing this. I'd like to say thank you to everybody for coming, quite apart from my Ethiopian friends. There's loads of people to thank, like Moniza Alvi and Karen McCarthy-Wolf, who've helped me a lot with the collection. Jane Duran, my lovely Thursday group, Michael Schmidt, who helped with quite a few of the poems as well. So I'd like to thank them all. Amasaganallo, as they say in Amharic. Shall I get on and start reading now?
Yeah, let's do that, Chris. Yeah, and then we'll have a chat afterwards. Okay.
So I can't see anybody, but you can see how flustered I'm becoming, because I have to get up the document now. So I'm hoping that that's going to go okay. So there's the document. So I have to now scroll down. How do I do that? There we go. So the first poem I'm going to read is the first poem in the book. It's called Inglizawi Nenia. Sometimes he stands on the balcony in his blue pajamas and sees it through the eucalyptus trees, slips out when day is lapping at the dark, and stands there looking over garden gates and walls, over tin roofs clicking in their shadows, down a track that wanders into the evening, out towards the faintly green distance of hills, already stirring with bats and the idea of pumas. He can hear bells and bits of conversation, someone far away banging a nail, knows himself to be small and foreign, standing on the balcony of a big, quiet house that holds him up, holding him like a hand under his feet, but never feels unwelcome in the semi-dark. If someone hails him from the track, he will call back, "Salam!" If someone asks, "Where are you from, little boy?" he will answer proudly, "Inglizawi Nenia." He does not really know right now where English is or what, but isn't troubled by the things he does not understand, while his eyes follow silhouettes of long-tailed birds, and he feels this moment stretch almost forever. And this photo here is I think taken by my father just outside on the track outside our house. And you can see there's loads of donkeys. There's probably something like, I think the figure is 7 million donkeys in Ethiopia. And I love donkeys. So I thought I would use something donkey-ish to introduce each of the 4 sections of Tenderfoot. And I came across this sort of poetic formula, which they use in folk poetry. which is Ahyamadach Dachna Bakila. Also, in fact, yes, the formula is basically, here comes a donkey loaded with, and then in this case, I've used beans, Bakila, but it can be anything, and that sets the rhythm, and it's also the rhyme of the poem. So there are a lot of donkeys in this book, be warned. The first poem after after that is a poem dealing with, I suppose, the basic inequality, because this book is all about hunger and inequality. And so this on the left here is a mesob, a basket. And when you take the top off, you see that there's the injera, this sort of pancakey bread, which is the national bread of Ethiopia, with the sauces on top. And you take a strip of injera and you scoop up the food to eat. Good bread for Abebe in memory. Still warm and spongy, almost wet, a circle of injera on the mesob sits in my mind's eye and goes with me, reaching its gentle hand into my head. Makes me think about the day your father took us to a market in the hills, that red-eyed roadside boy, furiously begging to be fed. Do any of us really understand, Abebe, how finger close a boy can be and still have nothing of the world's good bread? So here is Abebe, standing smiling in the center, and that's his father Asfar, our cook, standing next to him in a silly hat. I think it was a party that day. This is in the back garden of our house in Addis. Yeah, I thought how to write about hunger in Ethiopia. And I thought, well, let's start with Asfar. Let's start, who better than a cook to start with? And also I wanted to personify hunger. I wanted to make it into a living thing. Asfar's hunger. It was the smell of onions frying, coked his question out. What rumbles in your tummy, Asfar? Hunger, Asfar booms. Boy plants an ear. I hear a donkey and 2 taxis tooting. But is the donkey happy? There are buses grinding, scooters shrilling, drovers thwacking, hawkers hooting, a priest with shoes but no shoelaces, hear it, cursing every idle beast with hellfire, snakes, etc. And loud and clear, 2 grunting sacks of beans, 1 unruffled donkey, floppy, fly-tailed, calm as granite in the middle of this mayhem highway, munching its crisp hay. Fuck off, old priest, the donkey brays and keeps on munching. Asfar, your hunger stands its ground. Sweetheart. Yemisrach puts an arm around her husband, whispers Hode in his ear. Because here you say, my stomach, not my sweetheart. And I say, how on the nose that stomachs stand for love, here in Ethiopia, where people still admit how close a crop, and with it every masticating, sugar-burning, striding, strumming circuitry of science, art, philosophy, can come to being lost. Yemisrach wets our hands and towels them. Then Gedilu loads up a pouch of injera, one-handed with a zilbo stew. Hode, he says, as he says every day. The first mouthful is for you. This is a painting by a young Ethiopian artist that I really like. It's called No Country for Young Men. But actually, Ethiopia for me back in the 60s was a country all of young men, and it still is, actually. And the immense physicality of those men, of Ethiopian men, and how beautiful they are, and how close they are to one another. They're always walking arm in arm, hand in hand. Really struck me. I had a sort of eureka moment, or maybe many, where men went from just these beings to beings that I was hungry for. I was, I suppose, in love with Abebe, but I was watching other men. When I was 10, I started watching men. Some walk into a sunbeam and their heads catch fire. Some smoke an arm around their friend or saunter hand in hand with him. Others keep their shyness like a torch inside the pocket of their trousers, unzip themselves against a wall and whistle as their boiling water flows. Many have the necks of swans that suddenly swing round to look at you. Hundreds every day are causing bushfires to break out, boys' tongues to parch. Be my boy wife, one calls, but hotly, not a word, from the beautiful jet coals of his eyes. Small, angry famine. Hamad doesn't remember it. Nobody remembers it. But he sees people shuffling into Addis, something beaten in their feet. Now he starts to hear complaints, half poems shouted in the streets. And years later, when Fokade forages around the hills around Werelu, he finds that people still can barely bring themselves to speak about it calmly. But sometimes, standing on one foot, they fish an angry couplet from their throat. And these couplets, I learnt about the famine poetry of Ethiopia through this amazing book by Fokade Azaze, a professor at Addis University. And you can see here's one page from the book. And that gave me the idea to write a series of couplets in the voice of a boy my own age, going through the famine, which was rumored to be happening and did happen in the mountains of around Werelu in the mid-60s when I was there. And I wrote them, but before I got there, my lovely friend Karen McCarthy-Wolf said, no, Chris, you need to heighten, you need to have more contrast before you bring on the famine. You need to explain more about your own privilege and how life was around you. So the next section of the book is called, well, it's after the donkey loaded with figs. And the first poem, these poems are actually more like jottings in the context of our house and garden and the gates. And the first poem is about my mother's amazing ball gown, which was a strapless, polka-dotted, gorgeous gown that I remember her going off to a big banquet at the palace. Friday, early evening. Ravishing ball gown, splashed with polka dots, gold necklace, silver shoes. All his mother's fancy dress, breathless for the party. Sunday matins. St. Matthew's Church extended, bread of heaven pouring out, father singing, feed me till I want no more. My God, I'm starved, said bells, breath when Mrs. Benedict taps a descant. And the chaplain purples about sin, father doodles devils, pitchforks on his hymn book, choir boys dipped in boiling oil, little cries like, ooh, help, snakes alive. Back home, a gold rush to the dining room. Even sunshine here is hungry. Food smells so good on Sundays. Wayene holds a dish of lamb and roast potatoes, minted peas. Wayene pours the gravy with his other hand. His hand is generous. His smile is definitely godly. Thursday, 4-ish. Dozing in a gap where gates sprout arms, grab the wall. Looks up. 2 donkey jacks slide up and lower their long penises. In flood they ask, are you Prince Rasselas, living on a mountain in the Happy Valley? Are all your wants catered for, but still you long to see the miseries of the world? And laugh so hard they bray and bray so hard they almost burst. I think I need to be laughed at, like Prince Rasselas. Well, he wasn't laughed at, but I am. It's a bit the tradition of the innocent abroad. You have to laugh at yourself, or you have to laugh at him. So now I'm into the section which is imagining a boy living through the famine, which killed 50,000 people in this lovely landscape up in the north of Ethiopia. And it looks green and verdant then, but it obviously wasn't at the time of the famine in the mid-60s. So these are little couplets copying the famine poems. Tagessa's hunger poems. I asked for an egg, but the 9 saints say there's a shortage of hens, even in the sky. Why? Just a bunch of nettles and no water to boil the kettle. What killed my best friend Yared? Was it hunger or the wrath of God? The Abuna says prayer kills locusts and flies, so we spray it on our crops. Hyenas in the hills, romping, feasting. The supply of dead bodies is everlasting. A home without a mother, like a cattle farm, no fodder. Abate rode away, but the reins went loose. The mule saw that his heart was still in the house. Slowly, 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 the whisper becomes a shout. Rain is falling on the tongue of the drought. I shouted at famine, although it couldn't hear. Now I will only speak to things with an ear. My name is Tagessa. He endured. I am a boy who has hungered. That's only a few, by the way, a few of the couplets in that. I've truncated that section. So this is the last section of the book where the donkey is loaded with hope. And the first hopeful thing I come back to is the bookstores in Addis Ababa, like this one here, where I've been buying huge numbers of Ethiopian poetry books, and where one day I found this book, which is a book about Hambo by an Ethiopian female writer, and the first part of the book, or the first few pages of the book, is an Amharic translation of Le Bateau Ivre. And Hambo lived in Harar, down in the east of Ethiopia, trading coffee. And Le Bateau Ivre is sort of, it's sailing towards these mythical, these exotic landscapes. And translation for me is a bit the same thing. It's sailing towards an exotic landscape. It's sailing towards something different, and bringing yourself closer to what is different to you. It's bridging gaps, which I've always, I suppose, pathetically tried to do through my life, having grown up as a privileged little white foreigner in the beauty of Ethiopia. So this is a praise poem to the bookshops, to the teeming bookshops of Addis Ababa. A thirst for knowledge being one of the most urgent, do you see this brushstroke racing along Arat Kilo up the length of Wingate and Piazza? If stopped either by his shirt tails flying, or a hand on his athlete's shoulder, or his thoughts also flying, he would say a rumor reached him, too loud for daydreams, that a new translation of Rimbaud's Le Bateau Ivre is hitting the choppy water of your shelves, although he already owns a tattered copy in the French, 2 more in English, and 1 of almost holy status in Amharic, Yasakar Merkab. To see the same loved, breathing body of the poem behind the gauze of each reworking only adds to his excitement. Knowledge not in facts, but in the energy of words racing from language to language, bookshop, laptop on their bare feet, fitter, leaner, faster, the more they are taken into the thin air of the mountains and stretched. This next poem is about gay life in Ethiopia. Obviously, homosexuality is illegal. Nobody seems to really understand it. And the physical closeness of Ethiopian men is so attractive that it can lead you to believe that everything is fine and dandy, but I don't think it is. And I've dedicated this little poem to Becky and Mike. Becky is a gay activist who had to leave Ethiopia. But one of the things I remember him saying, I can't remember if it was to me or in a presentation, was that the ignorance of people about what it means to be gay is so total in Ethiopia that basically you can do really what you like in a way. You can dress like as you like. And I witnessed this when we visited Ethiopia with Esau in 2007, I think it was. And my friend Zelihun took us to the Mercato, which is a huge market in the west of Addis Ababa. And I think I've missed out I've missed the photo of the coffee house, because I thought, well, how can I do a reading set in Ethiopia, a poem set in Ethiopia, without showing you something to do with coffee and, of course, lions, the Lion of Judah. So here is Tomoka Coffee House together with the Roaring Lion, which both appear in the poem. And the word bushti means something like bum boy or puff or queer or something like that. I don't know where it derives from. So 3 bushti go to the Mercato. A trio of cursed boys, 2 short, 1 tall, hair in corkscrews so the air must feel it. Dawdle in Tomoka, sipping 3 lion cups of coffee from Harar, before they sally out again, freely but together, small fleet of lake dhows into the souks, sailing by the wind of their smiles, by the elegance of their fingers that praise a belt, just touching it. And 1 stallholder they call Gashe, meaning my shield, to show affection for the older man who treats them lightly but with dignity. Halloos his welcome, as you would too. Don't you thirst for tolerance? A little boat of colour on the lake of every day, shouting, my fellow citizens, my brave Zegotch, and all his merchandise of skimpy t-shirts, wild netalas, liberated jeans, get up on their feet and la, 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 and sing. I have to apologize for my awful ululation. Anyway, I do my best. I'm going to end with a prayer poem. Prayer is another way for me of bridging gaps. It's a way to bridge the gap with God, and it's a means of communication, like a poem. This one is about St. Gabriel, or it's a prayer to St. Gabriel. So here he is in an Ethiopian church painting, beautiful, with his beautiful wings. And St. Gabriel, I suppose, is best known for the Annunciation, for announcing the imminent birth of Christ to the Virgin Mary. But he's also known for his protective qualities. And here he is in this wonderful painting, protecting Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego from the fire. So here's my last poem, and thank you very much for listening. Prayer to a saint of 2 religions. Prayer rusts, says Alemo, whose father has a sickness of the heart and needs a lot of help from heaven. So Alamu takes words like mercy, penitence, and oils them in his mouth. Only when they shine like trumpets does he blast his prayer through St. Gabriel's wings, to lift his angel high into the sky above the perfect circle of the village church, the simple white square of the masjid. Thank you.
Fantastic, Chris. Great reading there. Really enjoyed that. Before
I
we,
was nervous.
there's plenty of time for being yet, Chris. Plenty of time for that. So, firstly, I should say there's a Q&A icon at the bottom of the screen. So, if you have questions to ask, please place them there, as Jasmine said earlier, or you can maybe put them in the chat room. But if you put them in the chat room, everyone can see the questions. And I assume I will ask some of those questions if you've got some there. Some fantastic poets listening today. Chris, there's Malika Booker there, Fawzia Kane.
Oh, hi Malika!
So fantastic. So actually, so maybe start with the kind of obvious question first. You referred to bridging gaps a few times.
Yeah.
Maybe that's part of the theme of this reading. And so I guess, in what ways are you bridging gaps in terms of your writing? Are you writing from memory, from childhood memory about Ethiopia, or are the poems also about contemporary issues that you're alive to because you visit that country and you go back and forth? So maybe you could talk a little about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the central, what started me off was trying to, Ethiopia boy was jumping up and down. It was the boy jumping up and down, praising everything around him. And that was forcing me to, not forcing me, but pleasing me by remembering things. For example, about Abebe and how he looked and how he moved and danced and all the rest of it. But this book, I thought, I wanted to look at myself. I wanted to see how I looked to others. This privileged little white boy, this sort of, candide, is basically what you are. You're so obvious to everybody around you. And I felt totally at home, but I also felt totally different. So I wanted to look at myself, but I didn't want to do that only. And I wanted to see what I felt at the time. And things that started to come out to me were my privilege. And when I was shocked, for example, seeing that boy begging, I mean, he was obviously starving hungry. And that really shocked me because everybody else around me seemed to be, I'd never thought about hunger. I'd never thought really about inequality. And so I thought about it a little bit as a child, but I think about it a lot more now. So I thought, well, I better write that mixture of things that come from the past, but which are important to me now. And I do go to Ethiopia a lot, as much as I can. But especially the last section of the book is full of now poems, in a way. It's full of my experiences when I go back and forth now. And they include, very unpleasant experiences as well as the more pleasant ones. For example, I don't want to exaggerate, but they have a very hot sauce called berbere, or powder, chili powder. And I've suddenly become allergic to it. And I think I almost died at one stage. And that felt to me like, wake up, Chris, wake up. Ethiopia is not this nice, prelapsarian, Garden of Eden. Ethiopia is a real country with real people and real problems as well. And, and I felt that it was attacking, that berbere, this chili powder, had actually attacked me physically and made me sit up and notice. And I wanted to write about that feeling and about, having to, praise poetry is not just about praising. It's about, facing reality and making reality, in a way, do what you want, but only after you've understood what it is. Does that answer your question?
Yeah,
there are other poems about having my pockets picked very violently. There's poems about a friend of mine who tried to emigrate to the UK and failed, in fact. And there's poems about the minibus conductors who work incredibly hard, about street boys selling tissues and chewing gum. I just wanted to give readers of this book a sort of a big wide view of what of the sort of things and people happening, which I really admire and I praise, but I also don't want to praise them in a way that stops the reader from understanding, what their life is like. I want the reader, I want myself, I suppose, and through me, the reader, to understand what it's like to be, a minibus conductor or a street seller in Addis now, as well as back in my childhood.
So I'm feeling.
Does that answer your question? Sorry.
Yeah, it does. So I'm really feeling the passion here, Chris. I feel your kind of investment in the project. And I guess tying into that in terms of style then, one of the things I liked about your work when I first came across it was you don't write in that cool, ironic, detached English style of the poem. And I guess what you're saying there really addresses that. You felt this big connection.
Well, that's where translation became so important to me, Daljit, because I was writing you showed us The Dog Who Thinks He's a Fish, and there are poems in that about Ethiopia, but they're written in sonnet form or much more normal English poetry forms. And I just I'd been to Ethiopia. We'd travel around with Esau up into the north. We'd had a wonderful time taken around by Zerihun, who is Anania and Yemisrach's eldest brother. And we'd had a lovely time, but I got sick then as well. And life was real, it was now. And I thought, well, I can't write poems, about Ethiopia, just as though I was, I can't write sonnets about Ethiopia. That's what I thought. And so I thought, well, I've got to read Ethiopian poetry, and then I couldn't find any translations, or very few. So I took myself. I realized I didn't speak much Amharic. I probably never had. So I took myself to SOAS, do a year's course, trying to understand more Amharic, and I met my best Ethiopian friend, who's Ali Mutabaja, who lives here, is a refugee here, and we started translating poems together. Basically, I would just ask him, "What does this poem mean?" But now I can do a sort of rough translation. I often get it wrong, but I'm much more comfortable with it now, and that became quite exciting, because we then started sending those translations out to magazines, and eventually we sent, after I think the first magazine that took some of our poems was Modern Poetry in Translation, when David Constantine was editing. David and Helen were editing, and then Sasha Dugdale took as well when she took over as editor. And Asymptote Journal and The Missing Slate and a few other magazines. But then we had a bit of a breakthrough, because Michael Schmidt heard that I was translating Ethiopian poems, and he asked me if I had any that I could submit to PN Review. And through that, he then he took a few poems from us, and then a couple of years later, I think it was, he suddenly popped the question, would you be willing to do an anthology of Ethiopian poetry in English? And that's just come out. In fact, that came out in May. It's called Songs We Learned from Trees, and it's doing great guns. It's going all over the world, America, Australia, Africa, of course. And it's 300 pages long. And it's all in English, so it's all translations, either translations that we've done ourselves, Alimu and me, or with help from people like Anania and Yemisrach and others in Ethiopia, or it's poems we found in the Journal of Ethiopian Studies of the Institute of Ethiopian Studies in Addis, which used to be edited by Richard Pankhurst, who appears in one of my poems, by the way. And we just gradually got this body of work together, and it was incredible because you learn, through translation, you just learn so much about what really is going on in a country. And some of the poems we put in there, I'm not sure what I think about them, whether they're great poems or not. But who am I to judge? In a way, it's instructive whether it's a great poem or not. And who's to say that a great poem in Amharic necessarily becomes a great poem in English? And we tried, but then we became a bit suspicious of ourselves by trying to make everything, fit the English poetry sort of harness, if you see what I mean. There's I went to a translation seminar at SOAS a few years ago, and they quoted, I can't remember the name of the translator, French translator, and he quoted this phrase, les belles infidèles, so the beautiful unfaithful ones, or the unfaithful beauties. So basically, the more beautiful the poem in English, the more unfaithful it might be to the original poem in Amharic. And we do have a few poems in the book which I do feel are very far from the Amharic, but yeah, that just happens in the process. I think I've witted on a bit too long.
Oh, well, you've answered a question that Fawzia had, so that's good. So it's good wittering.
Hi, Fawzia.
Sasha Dugdale's given a thumbs up to your anthology, which she says is amazing.
Oh, great.
That's great.
Yeah.
Malika's got a question. And I think she's saying, it's a statement, but she says it's framed as meant to be a question. So I'll read it out to you. She says, I'm interested in translation, not just language, but the culture and the internal shifts that you negotiate between childhood and adult Britain and Ethiopia. How do you go about dealing with that internal shift, Chris?
I don't really. I mean, I tackle it every day. Every time I write, I tackle that. Well, every time I write about Ethiopia, I tackle that because I still feel that I am a child in Ethiopia, that I'm the innocent abroad, basically. And it is a very difficult thing to translate yourself back to what you were, without imposing who you are now, of course, too much. I'm sure you do that anyway. But some poems, I've left out a hell of a lot of poems from this collection, which just seemed to me to be either too navel gazing, too obsessed with myself. What I didn't want in this book to really obsess too much, because I don't think the boy obsessed. That's what that first poem, Inglizoe Nenya, he wasn't troubled. He was shocked from time to time, the boy that I was. He was shocked, but he wasn't particularly troubled, I think. That trouble has come basically from being thrown out of Ethiopia. And that means that that my memories are tinged with that, looking back. So that sort of nostalgia, which I don't want to give into too much. I mean, I want it to be there because it's there, it's part of me. But so is my hunger that I first discovered, my hunger for men, which I first discovered in Ethiopia. So are all these good things I first discovered there. So I want that, the main part of the book, to be about the good things, or about discovering the realities of life, which I discovered there. And hunger for many things is one of those. Of course, I mean, there's a little poem in the book called, I think it's called When the Backyard Was a Boy. And I don't know if you remember it, Daljit. We had a big backyard in the house in Addis. But I was reading some conversations of James Baldwin back in the 60s. And he said, yeah, when the backyard was a boy, and it was prompted by this, one of the things he said in this interview was something like, white people in Manhattan talk about Alabama as though there was no Harlem. You know, so I'm talking about hunger in Ethiopia, but one of the things that really upsets me the most about our whole situation in the UK at the moment is child poverty and child hunger. I mean, you don't see it, you know, you don't see it, but it's there. And so if I'm talking about hunger in Ethiopia and famine, please don't think that it's far away. That's what I'm trying to say. Please don't think it's far away, it's here. So maybe that's, you know, I didn't want to put that point too, you know, I didn't want to stand on a soapbox and, you know, moralize about that, but
it's probably hard to get that balance, isn't it, Chris? Saying want to convey the beauty, almost like kind of Orientalist gaze, but
yes.
also to get really wound up and passionate about the contemporary politics, you know, the horrors of scenarios going on in that part of the world.
Yeah, they do. They have a lot of ethnic problems, of course, at the moment. But so do we, for God's sake, you know. That's the backyard problem, is that, you know, we tend to see problems clearer when they're abroad than when they're, you know, right on our doorstep. And I write about Ethiopia. In fact, Jasmine asked me to write a blog, or Becky asked me to write a blog for the Carcanet blog site. One of the things I said in that was that, you know, I'm always writing about Ethiopia and about my childhood. And a friend of mine said, oh, when are you going to start writing about now? When are you going to start writing about your life in London? And unfortunately, you know, you can see from, you know, I'm passionate about Ethiopia and I'm passionate about my experiences there. I also write about London, but it doesn't seem to slightly connect, to really connect in the same way. I don't know whether you have that in your work, Daljit.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. In your imagination, you inhabit sometimes a different identity to your day-to-day, which can feel slightly mundane material for the art you want to create, maybe.
Yeah, I suppose it's a fault of mine that I become energized when I'm in, and experiences that happen to me in Ethiopia just go straight into poems. They just, they explode and become a poem. And as you say, that's a bit the Orientalist gaze. But, I'm in good company. Rimbaud was exactly that, I mean, even when he lived in Harar, in, the coffee capital of the world, he was writing about, he was writing letters trying to organize visits to even more exotic places.
Just to be clear, I don't think you're an Orientalist gazer, though, Chris.
Well, I hope not, because I'm there.
The poems are far too alive and energized and seem to inhabit these voices. You do a lot of voices, whether it be the voice of wind.
Yeah, I think I learned that from a certain Daljit Nagra.
Did you find that an easy facility to get into things, or?
Well, I learned that from you.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Right. Thank you.
From your wonderful book that changed my world, really. The book we have coming to Dover, where you use so many different Indian voices, and I wanted to do the same. I'd never done that before, and this book is a bit funny because the donkeys are talking. I wanted the fuck off old priest, by the way. I was trying to do a sort of, I originally had it fuck off, because of the way the donkeys bray, but I just thought that was a bit over the top, so I wasn't brave enough to do that. Yeah.
Right, I'm just going through some questions. I think you've already answered Patrick's question from a while ago. He said, has the natural world of Ethiopia, so different from England, stayed with you? I think you've addressed that. Yeah. We've got one from Sash Trevitt. I think you've answered this. How do you negotiate dislocations you must feel when you return to Ethiopia? For you return still as that young boy, but the country has moved forward, has grown up. does this shake you? And I think you've addressed
It does. It really does shake me.
question.
I have to sort of pick myself up and say, hang on, you're not the boy anymore, you know. Wise up, Chris. And especially, and then things do it to me, like the berbere, you know, the chili powder attacked me. So that's like saying, you know, that's why I included that poem in the book, because basically it's, you know, the country itself is saying, you know, wake up, Chris. You know, you're not a boy.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's some shaking, shocking imagery. I mean, you just read a couple earlier, with fish an angry couplet from their throat.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that even the sunshine is hungry. I mean, the thing that hunger dominates, even the sunshine.
Yeah.
That's pretty bleak, isn't it? When even
well, actually, that sunshine was pretty, in my mind, that sunshine was just like, oh, yes, Sunday lunch, you know, let's get, you know, you're bored out of your brain in the church. My father was always doodling cartoons of, you know, little choir boys being pinched by the forks and stuff. And then we'd get home and we'd all rush into the dining room. So it was that particular sunshine being hungry is quite a sort of positive. It's not the same hunger as the boy begging or the boy in the mountains starving, you know, you know, it's not obvious from what I read, but his mother, the way I imagined it was that his mother dies. And actually, I'd like to say that there's a poem in the last section, quite near the end, where I was visiting the lion gardens in Addis, where they keep the descendants of Haile Selassie's lions. And there's a cafe, and there was these old men sitting there, and I thought, oh, they're all sort of my sort of age. So, you know, Tagessa, you know, the boy whose voice I use in the Famine poems, Tagessa could be one of these old men. He'd be this age now. And so I have a conversation with him, and he tells me to open my eyes. And it was quite a distressing poem that to write, because I was basically, you know, in a way, you know, creating or imagining a boy. And I thought that was done. You know, I thought he was there. I thought he survived the famine, but he was there. And then suddenly, coming into the lion gardens, I basically saw him. And that was quite a shocking experience. And part of, I suppose, my Rasselas, the process of basically, teaching myself how to be in Ethiopia as an adult and not as a sort of innocent, enthusiastic boy.
And probably not as a tourist either, because you've lived there. And you have
no, I never feel like a tourist in Ethiopia. I am, I suppose. I mean, one of the funniest things that happened to me was not in that bookstall that I showed the photo of, in another bookstall, where I was haggling with the guy wanted 400 birr for a book. Now, 400 birr is about £8. And most books go for £1 or £2. So he was really gouging. And instead of just, I argued, and finally I came up with an expression, "de haferenjnin," which means I'm a poor foreigner. And basically, the concept of a Westerner being poor, I mean, he just split his sides laughing. He wetted his pants, basically. Couldn't, you know, he was, and I needed that in a way. I needed that wake-up call, and I still need it. But I don't feel. I mean, I feel like a foreigner, but I don't feel strange, if you see what I mean. It's not a tourist destination for me.
Yeah,
even though I do go and stay in the hotels and go and visit the sites, because that puts money in people's pockets. So I want to do that, but I don't feel of myself that I'm a tourist. I've got wonderful friends. They're almost like family, and the photo of Asfa and his family with Abebe standing there. I mean, that's what it was like. We were part of that family. They were our servants, but then the concept of servant wasn't the same for me. If we've got time, I'll just tell you. Yeah, I mean, I asked my father one day.
3 minutes left, Chris. So
yeah, go on.
No, go on. Because I think it's an answer to a question that Makanan asked about an experience that's had a positive impact on you being a poet from Ethiopia. So this is kind of ties into that, I'm sure.
Yeah, actually, I'll just go on with Makonnen. Hi, Makonnen. Thank you for coming. Yeah, I asked my dad, I think I was about 8. I asked my dad what he did what was his work, and he said, I'm a civil servant. And I thought, and I didn't know what the name, I knew what the name servant meant was because we had servants, but I didn't know what the word civil meant. So I thought, well, that must be, maybe that's the ambassador's Christian name or something. So I thought, yeah, that makes perfect sense. You know, my dad's the servant of the ambassador. My dad has his servant, you know, his cook, Asfar. Asfar actually had a cook himself because he was always cooking for us. So he had his servant cook as well. That's the way that the child I was imagined that life was. That, you know, you were both somebody's servant and you had your own servants, which is not far from the truth, probably. I'm not sure if that answers McConnell's question, but
it's a good story. It gives us a kind of insight in the world you grew up in as well. And
we grew up I grew up. The things I remember are, you know, that the house and garden and trying to get out all the time with Abebe, but the friendliness and the love of those wonderful people that were around us.
Yeah, and I mean, just to finish up, I guess I just found that real affection, love there, even in your reading voice, the way you dramatise things. And one of your poems talk about, here comes a donkey, one of those couplets, here comes a donkey loaded with almond cakes, just another poem playing tricks. And I feel that about your work, you're having a good time.
Yes.
And, you know, and you're trying to give voice to other people with a kind of authority and affection, whilst making sure you have a good time. So the reader has pleasure. They're not just sort of beaten over the head with this kind of...
I hate to beat them over the head.
So,
thank you very much, Daljit.
That's been a pleasure. I think we'll pass over to Jasmine. So hopefully everyone will go out and buy the book or order it online or whatever you need to do. It's a fantastic read. Calmer, quieter, some of it, Chris, isn't it?
Yeah, it's calmer than Ethiopia Boy, yeah.
Different tone coming through. So it's very interesting. It's good to see you kind of developing as a writer. So wonderful. So
thank you very much, Daljit.
Really good reading. Really enjoyed that. I'll pass you over to Jasmine now.
I just want to say thank you to both of you, to Daljit and to Chris. Well done, Chris. Your reading was really, really brilliant. So it was great to hear you talk about it as well. And thank you guys for sending your messages in the chat and for putting your questions in. It's been a really, really lovely evening. As I said, please check your emails tomorrow. You'll get an email with a discount code so that you can get your £2 off the book, which you obviously need to buy now. But do email me if you have any problems with that. So yeah, please join us on August the 26th. We're going to launch Catherine Horrocks' debut collection, Growlery. Mariam Hassavi will be hosting that reading, so please do check that out on our website. And I think that's everything. Thank you, and well done, and congratulations, Chris.
Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye, everyone.